you're watching Policy Beats with me, Hamzah Rifaat. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing the EU Disinfo Lab's recent report titled Indian Chronicles, which details India's subversive activities, disinformation campaigns, as well as their ability to come up with fake accounts, impersonations, and other modes of subversion. This has targeted members of the EU Parliament. It has also targeted EU diplomats as well, and it's also part of a targeted campaign against India's adversaries, China and Pakistan. Now, what should the international community's response be? Can such cybercrime be left unattended to? Joining me is the official member of the International Alliance for the Defense of Rights and Freedoms, as well as president of Post Versa, a human rights and fundamental rights chapter, Mr. Andy Vermont. Mr. Andy Vermont, thank you so much for joining me on Policy Beats. My first question is a very simple one. Now, the revelations of the Indian Chronicles basically speaks about fake accounts, impersonations, and subversive activities. And we're talking about many fake accounts which have actually been used by the very same Srivastava group. How significant are these findings, and what can one do to try and tackle them?
Good question. Yes, this is extremely important, hence my congratulations to Disinfo Lab for making these disturbing developments known worldwide. Yes, this is very important. Who would ever have thought that this would be possible? That we could be so deceived today in 2020. No one would ever have thought this, and no one would ever have thought that a country like India is dealing with such matters. It seems more and more that the Indian intelligence services are involved in this matter. This false information that eventually becomes official information purely to hurt Pakistan and China, that is unseen. We have never been able to meet such a large operation in the whole world. In addition to Pakistan, China is also at a disadvantage. It concerns 265 news websites that damage China and Pakistan. It is very likely that there is a lot of jealousy in India around the rising Pakistan, which is attracting important Chinese investments via the China-Pakistan economic corridor. We now need to disinfect the internet and free it from such fake sites. An even larger scale investigation is required. We are talking about taking on identities of other people, humans, people who have died, but also organizations that are recognized by the United Nations Human Rights Council. And meanwhile, they have ceased to exist, and these organizations are aimed purely and exclusively at inflicting as much damage as possible on China and Pakistan.
Now, Mr. Andy, this campaign has targeted the President of the EU Parliament, Martin Schulz, and it has also targeted former UK Minister James Purnell, with close to 750 fake accounts covering 119 countries and 61% of the world's population. Is this excusable from a country which touts itself as a secular democracy?
I myself am really outraged by this disinformation campaign, which only had the attention to isolate Pakistan and China on the world stage, but also to indicate and to ensure that India in particular is in a good light. It is certain that Martin Schulz is also a victim of this, and indeed, as you are well informed, there are more than 750 fake media channels that have been spreading disinformation and fake news on a constant basis. All this purely and simply to achieve a total mass influence. According to my sources, this is the largest exposure of fake news sites in the world. This is unseen. This has never happened before. We don't know of any larger disinformation sites in the world that would exist elsewhere. We have never seen this before, and this is of course not excusable. It is a form of propaganda that really tries to put all the Pakistani citizens and all the Chinese people in a bad light. But also the European Union was and put in a bad light by associating them with the so-called support of the European Union to Narendra Modi. This so-called support of European politics at some point, and it is considered to be the supreme good in the world, where people present their own nationalism as an example to the whole world and pretend to have this support of the European Union and the United Nations. This is also deceiving the Indian people themselves, pretending to have the support of the largest parliament in the world, the European Parliament, and also pretending to have the support of the whole European Union. Yes, that is really bad. This is something that really should not happen with impunity and should never happen again. So I think this should have consequences for the Indian government that has the final responsibility. The Indian government should be held accountable for this in the courts, and I would like to help to set up such a court case with the legal specialists from all the victims. But in any case, we urgently need to sit down with as many players as possible who are victim of this disinformation. All injured parties need to sit down together in order to be able to do this in a good way, because it is unseen. The damage is enormous for Pakistan, China, but also the damage for the European Union and the damage for the United Nations, but also the damage for all the minorities who live in India, who are also a victim of these Indian policies. Yes, we can't just express that in billions of dollars of euros. This damage is actually enormous. And if we don't do this, new sites will be created tomorrow. We have to act on this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Andy Vermaat, the president of Post Versa, who is briefing us on his views with regard to India's subversive activities and the very fact that these activities are both inexcusable and deserve to be reprimanded in the strongest of terms. Now, the question is how international bodies such as the European Union, as well as the international community, would actually respond to such cybercrime activities. Because countries like Belgium have been touting or actually promoting human rights to a large extent, and they've also been considering transparency to be one of the fundamental principles as far as dignity of life is concerned. Now, in this case, we've had fake accounts, we've also had impersonations, and we've also had a targeted cybercrime campaign. Is this excusable or not? This is the question that I would like to leave you. To join us for further episodes of Policy Beats with Hamzah Rifaat, you may log on to our social media pages on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter. Till next time, Allah Hafiz.